This podcast, Strange, Rare, and Peculiar, is for kind of those in the know about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, bringing you more information about what you need to know, and maybe what you can leave aside about homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
Yeah. I like that as a start. Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello.
Here we are.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Episode 184.
At least.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Tell me about your morning.
My morning. Our morning started with a very interesting, wasn't really a wake up. I was already long awake, but
Incident.
There was an incident, and that was there's a dog. Wait, that's loud.
Stirring my coffee.
You're stirring your mud. You have mud?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really. I bet that's really loud on the thing.
And
care. You're stirring it with a fork.
Fork.
I knew. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, so there was a dog. So a dog showed up yesterday, and he's so sweet. He was there 5:30 yesterday morning. He was sleeping in our lavender. He's absolutely beautiful. He looks to be like a pit bull. He's very tall. He seems to have some sort of pit bull in him, and he's leggy. He's unneutered. He is shy, and he was around all yesterday. He's got a leash on him, and anyway, so I fed him yesterday. And
when you said he turned up, you mean?
He just was in our yard.
Right.
Yeah, and
a stray.
And of course, you know how I feel about strays. I want them all. I name them, I feed them, and it's really bad.
It's really, really bad.
I know. Yeah. I know. I can't help it. Anyway, so we're trying to deal with him. But so then yesterday, he disappeared last night. Oops, wait, I've been instructed to move closer to the microphone. How's that? Okay. Mm-hmm. He disappeared last night. I've got some neighborhood folks from one of our neighborhood Facebook groups who are the dog rescuers. Anyway, he was back this morning, but what happened was he had his head in a hosta. I heard him barking like mad, and I thought he had one of our cats. Freaked out, ran downstairs.
Woke me up.
Woke you up. You ran downstairs.
From my deep slumber.
Oh dear, your deep slumber. Yeah, anyway. What do you
mean anyway? He'd also gone through 4 of the garbage.
So we had a big party on Saturday, so there's a ton of rubbish. And the dog ripped the rubbish. It was all the driveway, instead of gravel, was rubbish. And
trash.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a mess. Anyway, So there's that. The point of the story was that you went back to bed with a cup of tea, and I came to visit, and you were watching a YouTube video. Can you just explain what you were watching?
Yeah, those videos where you watch, the 20 minutes of your life you never get back again, but you're watching people excelling in the work that they do. Like cutting hedges straight. Yeah. and driving a forklift in a straight line.
But the best part about it is the title. It was like 20 satisfying minutes.
Yes.
They always say it's going to be satisfying, right? That's the thing. 20 satisfying minutes of people, what was it, being efficient at their jobs or excelling at their jobs?
Yeah, excelling at their jobs.
So I made fun of you right, as I do. And so then I sit down next to you and I open up my iPad and I start watching the remainder of the video I was watching, which is on efficiency and note-taking, using the Notes app and all of the hidden features in the latest version.
We get some questions
my gosh.
on this podcast, and one of them is, what do you guys do to relax?
Apparently,
how do you keep your stress
our
levels
weird
down?
Is yeah.
Oh my Lord, YouTube gets a thrashing.
Oh, I had to I signed into you have like the paid for YouTube. So I got into that, and then I lost like the algorithm that had been built up for me over time.
I mean, you should see the look on Denise's face when she gets a YouTube channel full of rugby clips.
Cricket clips.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
From the 1970s.
Mm-hmm. I had to start all over again with some of the weird things that I like on YouTube.
My friend Jerry, in New York.
Yeah.
He just sends me random stuff. He'll send me a clip of Dennis Compton. You've never heard of Dennis Compton, or Colin Cowdrey from 1974 facing Jeff Thompson. It's like just unbelievable. I'll get it at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Awesome.
He's doing the same thing as I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
Okay, anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Although, it was interesting because I was thinking about, well, we decided we were going to answer some of your questions, of which there have been so many, and for which we are very appreciative. Because it's really fun, first of all, to know that anybody's listening to this. We'd do it anyway, even if nobody was listening, because it's fun. But what are the things that, we hope people really think, like we hope that this gets you to just think and ponder some of the questions, like we do. Like my research question, what the hell is homeopathy?
Well, there's that.
Yeah.
But there is, I suppose, let's start with this one. If you could ask Hahnemann one question, what would it be? Yeah.
So I do ask him a lot of questions. For those of you who might not know this, I have a painting of Hahnemann. Well, it's in the library. My office used to be in the library, and it was behind me. And I would have conversations with him, especially during the time when I was writing about the alchemical history of homeopathy. And the question, so actually that's slurping. Oh my God.
Denise doesn't really appreciate my soup drinking antics.
The slurp, it's so...
But I learned how to drink soup in Japan and Malaysia.
Yeah, okay,
it's a
fair
sign
enough.
Of
so it's a sign. But first of all, it's not soup. Second of all, you're in Philly. Okay, so the question now of being... Gosh, we're a little punchy today, aren't we?
Uh-huh.
I can't sit because... Actually, can I start? I want to just start with one other small adage, because you started by saying, people ask, what do we do to relax? There's something really amazing that is happening in my world, which is causing me to sit funny today. But I was in a dance company back 100 years ago in the 80s, and...
well, a bit more than that. You should...
More than 100 years ago.
No, not more than 100 years ago. Give a bit more context to that. These folks think that you're a nerdy library goer.
Oh yeah, but I come from danceteria. So I was in this dance company in New York in the 80s, and we just like literally had the best time. These people were like everything in my world for a long time, and we were really inseparable. And so the choreographer, Patrick, has remained my best friend. We are in our 39th year of friendship. And recently, we decided that we were going to do our warm-up from the 80s again. And some of our, some of the dancers, a couple of people that danced with us, everybody's older now. Patrick just turned 69 in April. One of our friends has Parkinson's. One of the guys that danced with us, I actually don't know what I don't know what his diagnosis is, but he's got some neurodegenerative issue. And so it's kind of like, here we are turning back up again 35 years later. And there were two things that really struck me. One was muscle memory. I cannot believe, we're piecing back together this warm-up that we did every day. And because we haven't worked out how to get the music to play on Zoom, and they're just two of us working together, the choreography, it's really been amazing to see, where the memories come, where, what we're missing. And then the other thing is just that you can do things that you don't think that you can do. I mean, I've had a daily yoga practice for a really long time. And so I feel like I'm sort of limber in my body. But what you do in a dance thing and what you do in yoga are really different. And so it's different muscles, and there's a different way of being in the body. And I have to say, it is like the best thing.
Can I give my perspective?
Yeah, because you've...
Well, I've walked into the room when you're engaging in this kind of activity.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
And the noises.
Oh my gosh.
The noises and then the laughing have really struck me as, let's call it as it is, two old folks.
Yeah. Two really old folks trying
roll back the years to your, how old were you?
Oh my gosh. I was 18 when I joined that company.
So you're 18 in New York in 1980 something.
1983. I started in the company in early 1984.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I just turned 18.
so that's 30 years ago.
That's almost 40 years ago.
40 years ago.
Yeah.
Sorry, 80s.
39.
And the noises.
Oh my gosh.
And then exactly what you said, because I did have a little look, just a wee one, and the muscle memory.
Yeah.
It's incredible. All of those things, all of that activity we do is, I think when the nervous system is growing and firing and linking at those developmental points.
Yeah.
You'll never lose them.
I haven't used ballet French in a really long time, and I thought, that's the language that, it's just been so much fun. But the reason I brought it up is because I'm having a hard time sitting, because I'm sitting with a cat on my lap, and boy, do my hips hurt. I haven't had to turn out my hips into a full second position for a long time. Anyway.
Can I also just mention that these two folks, Denise and Patrick, were in the 80s. Patrick and yourself would have turned heads. You're both pretty hot.
Listen to you.
Well, I've seen photos of you.
That's really sweet of you.
Still pretty hot.
I just think of it as being like I had 80s hair to end all 80s hair.
Did you?
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
How long did it take?
To do my hair?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember the styling being a big thing, but I had a faux hawk, like a mohawk, but I could wear it down to cover it because I had a job, And then when we go to Danceteria, it would be like, I had this it was like a paste, so I could make my hair stand up in a full faux hawk. You need to
talk about Madonna's ass and Danceteria.
Oh, no, Madonna. So she used to go to the place where she used to take the classes and where we danced. Anyway, let's leave her out of it for today. But I have to say, I have been listening to. Someday I'll tell the Madonna story of when. It's a hilarious story, but we've talked too much about stuff not homeopathy.
All right. Well, it's all homeopathy, especially the dancing.
Why didn't you say dancing? You're getting too Americanized.
No, dancing.
Anyway.
Because I say dance in Australia.
Oh, okay.
Dance.
Yeah.
In the UK and New Zealand.
Yeah.
And dance over here in Aussie.
Oh, fair enough then. Anyway, so that was just, that little aside was, first of all, inspiration. Because if you think you can do it, I'm surprised we can. We didn't think we could stand up and do some of the things that require a level of balance.
And he was really hesitant and
did not want to do it.
He's totally back into it, isn't he?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I can see that the summer's gone.
Wait till we get everybody else. But muscle memory and Hahnemann. So, well, there are a couple things. There are a few questions that were asked. One of them, you started with the biggest one, what do you want to ask Hahnemann? But there was another question. Can we just sideline a little so that there at least is some semblance of a connection to this preamble? Studying and developing muscle memory. Because one of the questions is around studying Materia Medica. And...
Oh, you mean that link between the YouTube things we were watching and learning Materia Medica?
And muscle memory. Oh, look, there's a thread.
All right. So
it's like case analysis. Always looking for the thread. So, and maybe this is something to ask Hahnemann. Okay, here's how it all comes together. You ready? I'm going to try this. Would he recognize what we do today as being homeopathy?
Oh, my God. Yeah, he would.
Yeah, he totally
would.
Not all of it, but not all of it, I think.
No, not the 3 consultations.
No, and not the English lit version of case analysis. But the study, one of the questions was, would I show my Materia Medica notebooks from when I was a student? I want to ask you, what do your Materia Medica notebooks look like?
I've still got them. I scanned them all.
Did you?
Yeah, one rainy Easter.
Uh-huh.
And, scanned just page after page went through.
Yeah.
And they are, to be honest, I don't really look at them because my Materia Medica, my initiation into Materia Medica was Janet Snowden and Misha, David Mundy.
Same.
So I found that while very engaging lectures, this is not a critique, but I found that the personalization, the storytelling around the Lycopodium type and the Ignatia type became less and less important to me over the years as I learnt more and more about reading provings, understanding affinities.
Yeah.
And that information was in those lectures as well.
Totally.
But I think I've got them in my memory. And so I don't actually refer... So my folders, my Materia Medica folders are now electronic buckets with files in them. And I've got into that habit. It just sort of works with my brain. So I do have my notes from the day, but then I've got this article, these images, essentially a Materia Medica portfolio.
Yeah. The one assessment that makes students buckle at the knees.
Yeah. But
which is funny, right? It's like the one that shouldn't be a buckle at the knees assessment.
Well, no, it depends.
Yeah.
So, but what about you? Well, I know I can answer your question because I carry those bastards around.
He's talking about my notebooks because I have them in physical notebooks.
I've carried them from place to place.
Yeah.
So many times. But you use them.
Yeah, I totally do.
And they're paper, right?
They're paper in plastic sleeves. But I only use one part of them. Right? So let's just, for the uninitiated, right, if people are kind of new coming to homeopathy school. So what we're talking about is the way that we study remedies. And it's a lot of information that you've got to sort of catalog in your brain. And a lot of people say, well, you don't need to memorize it because you just have to be able to find it, which is true, but you need a starting place. And so there are things that you kind of need to remember. And so one of the things that I was taught early on, and this was a Misha that I learned from Misha, although in a different way, was mapping a remedy. But you were taught the same way, the hub and spokes idea.
Yeah, that was kind of an agreed upon good way to do it.
Yeah, so the idea was you would find sort of the central theme in a remedy, you would put that in the middle, and then you would and like a circle around it. And then you would have like spokes coming off, and then you would attach other ideas to it, which now...
Linked ideas.
Linked.
Things that were linked.
I thought you said lint as in like dryer lint.
No, that's the stuff in my belly button.
Ew, God, between the slurping and that, like, people don't need to know. Sorry. Anyway, linked ideas, yeah. So that's sort of where it started, and I still do it. I map, anytime I learn a new remedy, I map it. Just like I map every case.
Right.
It's totally a visual thing for me, but I don't hub and spokes anymore.
Yeah, but you have a mapping style par excellence.
I think it's...
Which is, really good.
But you know what? It's like, it goes back to the dance thing.
No, it's not. It's a bit like your reverse parking. It's one of your superpowers.
Oh, that's my superpower. I can park in a parking spot smaller than my car, which really isn't good, but you live in New York long enough, and like it's survival. Yeah. Anyway, but no, I actually think it's muscle memory. This goes back to the dance thing, right? So if you just do it all the time, so if you map every remedy you learn and you map every case that you see, even on the occasions where you know the remedy that you're going to give because there's, sort of an obvious choice, which is probably less than 10% of the time. But I'll still map those cases because the maps are an integral part of sort of how I can see. It's like that's what burns it in my mind. I think it's the process too.
Well, it's the process and using a different part of your brain.
I think that's it.
The opposite. Let's say your case taking your notes would be right brain activity, but the left suddenly gets engaged with the colours and the themes. I mean, I'm thinking of, some folks won't know what I'm talking about, but, the maps that I've seen you come up with are pretty special.
Oh, thanks for saying that. That's really sweet. I mean, this is sort of lopsided because you've complimented me a number of times today, and I've pointed out grossness in things that you've done.
It's just the way it is. I'm used to it now.
I'm really sorry. Yeah. I apologize. But honestly, though, sometimes the noises are a lot. Anyway, but this idea of mapping, though, is this is such an important part of, for me anyway, of the study of Materia Medica and case analysis.
Yeah.
And it's changed over time. Like if I were to look at all of the things that I put into my folios for my Materia Medica notebooks, what I would do is I had the map of the remedy on one page.
Yeah.
And then imagine there are these plastic sleeves in a 3-ring binder.
Yeah.
So then you would turn the other page and you would have in that same folio, I would print out from, at that time, Mick Repertory, Materia Medica. Like an excerpt from Materia Medica.
So Fadak or someone.
And at the time, I used a lot of Rajan Sankaran, and it was from The Soul of Remedies, I think, or maybe Spirit of Homeopathy. No, Soul of Remedies, yeah. And because at that time, 20-some years ago, there was so much of this emphasis on what we then called, well, probably still people do, the central delusion of the case. And there was real emphasis on the mind part. But what's interesting is that the maps didn't emphasize that. They were kind of like, like an old school, like 19th century case analysis, right? Like what are the features of a remedy? And then there would be the story. And I think with some of those with Sankaran, like I still remember the story. Like I could, like Lakaninam, for example, he tells the story of an Indian woman who has a darker complexion, right? So that would have been at a certain time considered to be less, desirable. Therefore, she would have and like those stories, just like you said about learning Materia Medica from folks like Misha or Janet or whatever, they stick in your mind.
Isn't it? It's a fine line because, what you want is your primary teacher to be able to give you examples of the use of a remedy clinically.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially, well, that's what happens when you stand up and you give a lecture. Okay, I had this person,
yeah.
They had these symptoms, they responded to lycopodium, I'm going to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Right? And so you tell the story, and then you'd say, I've seen this feature in a number of other cases as well.
Yeah.
But it's quite a fine line between that and, Miss Pulsatilla.
Right. There was a great moment in clinic the other day, Bex, who just finished her year 1 full time, and she's fantastic and she's fun. And with one of the things about, oops, my phone's ringing. One of the things about knowing your students, like being part of a community also, is when you get to know people, that there are people who can like take it when you push back. Yeah. Which is just part of like, come on now, we're going to learn this. And Bex the other day said something like, oh, and I saw this client and I thought, yeah, total. She's like such a phosphorus. And I was like, Bex? And she goes, oh no, wait, I'm going to say it a different way. And then she was like, there are aspects of the remedy phosphorus that I could see clearly in.
I like that.
It's like such a total subtle thing, right? And I love that I could give Bex a nudge because I know, she's like so on it. And it's like these little subtle shifts in language that I think help us to deepen our learning. Yeah. But if we focus on, and I think this is hard sometimes for folks that stay in that learning the type too long. Like that's really helpful in the beginning. And then Jeremy Sher had, he on one of his, what would they call the 8R or something? It was for 7R. I forget what the title was, but he did like a series of
Rant
webinars.
Was one of them.
Oh, that's right, his ranting. And it was about sort of how do we get back to our roots? That's what it was, right? And I loved these. And I remember one day I was listening to one while I was walking the dog. And it was such a good one because he was talking about Vithoulkas and the stolen essences. And this idea, that George Vithoulkas did this really cool thing in the 80s, right? In the 80s?
79, he went to Esalen the first time.
Okay.
And then 80, 81.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea was, and Esalen is in Northern California, and is it Central or Northern California?
No idea.
I'm not a Californian, so I think what I think is north and what I say is north is often not what's known as anyway. But sort of that during that time of a lot of the, I want to say sort of hippie and spiritual kind of, but not really, because a lot of those folks who were there were all medical. You had to be a doctor at that time. Anywho, but what was coming out of these teachings was around what he then called the essence of the remedy, which was essentially the psychological profile. Although when you look at his Materia Medica, it's so much more than that, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, with that book, it's essentially what Bill Gray wrote down at the time. And I think it would have been interesting to have been there, but I have a suspicion that the lectures were a bit more broader than just those mental essences.
Because that's what happened. And it really got passed down. I think that's a lot of what you see in Morrison's Blue Book. I
think so too.
For people who have Roger Morrison's desktop guide to, what is it, Keynotes and Confirmatories, right? Which is like the CHC test Bible. Everybody uses that for their Materia Medica. But it's the intro, so much of it, I think, comes from the mental and emotional stuff. That's often but what Jeremy talked about in one of those R's was how that sort of profile business is super helpful in year one of learning homeopathy, because you need something to hold on to. And you need an anchor, right? And I think that's what the stories also do. They give us an anchor.
That's a really good point, isn't it?
Yeah. And then as you mature, you don't really use that anymore. It's not that helpful. Like to just think of lycopodium and the lyxopodium, and having, being a bully and kicking the dog. Well, people sort of feel like the mental has to be there. The mental profile as opposed to a symptom, like dictatorial as opposed to the whole big profile. And then you could miss a really simple case of a liver issue.
Totally.
Right? A digestive issue. So as we go along and we learn more, I think we use completely different resources.
If I'm studying a remedy that I'm not so sure of, if I want to understand it quickly, I do have a process. It's interesting because, I usually start with a substance. And why that's important is every now and again something pops up in your repertory and you don't know what it is. And the thought that I have is, let's look in a useful, general, quick, useful keynote book. Is it in Boricki? No, it's not. Okay. Is it in Morrison? It's not there either. And so then you realize, well, hang on, this is a substance that possibly has newer information about it. So I usually start with a substance.
So in other words, you're not talking about Doctrine of Signatures.
No, but I do want to know what it is.
Yeah. Just to describe, the Doctrine of Signatures comes from an ancient principle that whatever the substance is will have some sort of tells as to how it is useful for healing. So,
well, for centuries, clinical decision making was often based on a feature of the doctrine.
Yeah.
Of signatures of all sorts of different stuff from nature.
And Hahnemann,
right up into Hahnemann. I mean, Hahnemann's proving methodology is directly related to trying to get away from that.
Exactly. Yeah. Hahnemann was against the Doctrine of Signatures,
it's a core feature of Galenic medicine
and Paracelsian.
Right.
Also. Yep. So Hahnemann was saying, well, actually, that kind of goes to the aphorism 20 idea of you can't, with your intellect, understand what the curative properties of a substance will be.
Yeah.
It's only through the proving that we get that information. Basically, you get that, the 153, the strange, rare, and peculiar.
So totally. But still, I do want to know about the substance.
Yeah.
So I do want to know what the plant looks like, or I was having a chat with some students yesterday and we were discussing sepia pretty quickly, just a bit of a review.
Yeah.
And, a couple of really interesting questions came up about, can you extract the ink from the creature without killing it?
Oh.
Exactly. As I never even questioned that. My guess would be no, because it's a sack of ink that's that's embedded in the body, and that's really what we use. That dense ink,
and we use it to make pasta.
And photos stuff, ink. But so I that's where I start.
Yeah.
I start there, and then I don't want to get too attached to it because then I don't want to see. I'm not going to make too many links between features of the creature or the plant and chosen cherry-picked symptoms,
right?
That just happen to fit. So and then you've got to go to the proving at some point.
Yeah. A lot of times with case analysis, people stop at the repertorization. We spend a lot of time talking about the repertory is not an oracle. It doesn't give you the answer. It just you've got to work it so that it gives you information that you then have to track down.
Now you're a million miles away from where you started. You started with Hahnemann, asking a question of Hahnemann, and then you got to Materia Medica.
Well, because I think
studying Materia Medica.
Yeah, because, the way that we use Materia Medica, back in Hahnemann's day, they would have proving symptoms, and some clinical symptoms, but mostly proving symptoms, and this index, and you would match the constellation of symptoms. And, this is sort of not including chronic diseases as a big factor that happened in his later evaluations, but there were less remedies, and he, in the beginning, was working with a smaller subset of principles, right? So I think, like the way that a student or a practitioner studies Materia Medica, I think we can compare it to the arc of Hahnemann's journey, because he started out with a really simple idea, right? So this idea was just, an aha moment while, translating Cinchona in Cullen's Materia Medica and having a recognition around that, similar. And by the time you get to Paris, even before you get to Paris, by the time you get to chronic diseases, I was just teaching Chronic Diseases, the book, to the Taco Tuesday crowd on Tuesday night. And, I've changed how I teach Chronic Diseases, the book. I had to stop teaching it for a couple of years because I was too in the weeds and I needed a different perspective. And then this moment of like, oh, wait a second. The book, you need to understand how the book evolved and what's in it and how to use it and so forth. But you also need to understand where Hahnemann was along the way so you can read through the simplicity of it to see the depth of it, right? And so now we kind of come around now to questions to ask Hahnemann, right? So I know, scary. So I'm having this email correspondence with an Australian. Is Peter Berryman? Is he Australian or is he English living in Australia?
No, he's Kiwi.
He's a Kiwi. Oh, okay. So there's
Pete.
What's that?
Pete.
So I met him a few years ago. Somehow he reached out to me because he had heard one of my talks where I was talking about Hahnemann and alchemy. And we've maintained some correspondence, and we saw each other again when I gave a talk to the faculty of homeopathy, the London group, British group. Anyway, so he asked a very interesting question, and it's about... So he's very much into the alchemical history of homeopathy through the lens of Paracelsus. My work suggests that Paracelsus was not a part of Hahnemann. Hahnemann fought back against Paracelsus, but I think what people take that idea to be therefore alchemy, when that's not the case.
Right.
Right? It's just that there are a lot of alchemists over thousands of years doing lots of different stuff. And Hahnemann, over time, picked up some of those threads. He didn't start there. Yeah, he most certainly ended there. I feel pretty confident about that. And I think he hit his stride with it, with the time he was writing Chronic Diseases. So like 1816 to 1828 is when everything shifts. He gets more into mineral remedies. He leaves the plants behind, except for the most part, not exclusively, but plants that were useful in the treatment of venereal diseases, acquired venereal diseases, so syphilis and psychosis and chronic diseases. So the conversation with Peter is really interesting because it's like, well, there are all of these sort of historical factors to be considered, including Constantine Herring, who has the second largest collection of Paracelsian materials in the world. And so I think this is how I ended up really looking into Herring, because he took a different direction. He took a different trajectory. And that being said, Lippi followed Hahnemann very closely, but I have not found any evidence of Lippi and the alchemical interpretation of things.
Don't think so. Straight up medic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And great homeopath. Mm-hmm. And used homeopathy in this really sort of incisive way, like just like cuts to the chase, no fancy business, whatever, and really true to core principles. So the question for Hahnemann, I think, is a different question than a lot of people would ask. So, for example, most of the work, it took a long time in kind of going through other people's sort of explorations of what some people would call the alchemical history of homeopathy, but it all intersects with vitalism, right? The vitalistic principles and sort of a spiritualization of homeopathy. And I think it's really anchored in a 19th century British and psychotherapeutic, sort of Freud, Jung, all of that, right? Including the collective unconscious and all those things that we've talked about in the past. And so the question that I would want to ask Hahnemann wouldn't be, were you a vitalist, right? That's, when I talked to Peter Morrill and he said to me that time, oh, that old chestnut. I love that. But that is a question that often comes up. Was Hahnemann a vitalist? Was Hahnemann a spiritualist? Was Hahnemann, all... I think it's a very, very different origin story. And my questions would be around not just what were his influences. I mean, those threads sort of come up, but where did he get in the synthesis of it all in his last years? And where did he think we could take it? Right? Because, when people say, homeopathy is so old, we need a contemporary way to apply it, blah, 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 blah. I'm not so sure about that. I think it's more, what is possible? What is possible within what we do so that we can figure out how to get there? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So the question is?
The question is kind of what the hell is homeopathy?
Yes.
Right? From the beginning, law of similars, on through to, all those evolutions that Hahnemann made over time, because he goes from similars as the first principle to, some of these substances are similar but toxic, therefore, has to come up with the pharmaceutical preparation, right? Does a completely different course of research, which ultimately leads to chronic diseases, right? And I'm pretty sure that that's how the connection comes, is that by 1816, it's only 6 years after the publication of the first Organon, Hahnemann is recognizing not just that that people were relapsing and that he hadn't, capital C, cured these cases, but if you follow the parallel trajectory of the evolution of pharmacy, right, you start to see the subtle changes he made to the making of the medicines over time that carried forth all the way to the very end with 50 millesimal potency, right? But also trituration of soluble substances to the standardization of the number of succussions. Do you know what I mean? So over time, Hahnemann's making parallel and integrated discoveries of how to do this medicine. And I think what's often surprising to people is what he left behind. Yeah, like a lot of plant remedies, very few plant remedies. And so when you see a contemporary homeopath kind of staking their entire career on the study of plant remedies. It's like, okay, I mean, great. I'm sure we're going to find some exciting things that will help a person or two or 20 or 100. But is that connected to where Hahnemann ultimately got? Is that going to help us? You know what I mean? Like the emphasis on Materia Medica in homeopathy. In other words, if I keep finding more and more and more remedies, yeah, it's like online dating, I think.
Really?
I think so.
In what way?
That, the people like who are just swiping, you're always going to find something better. Just keep adding to the arsenal of possibility, as opposed to just finding, true connection.
I think that's the title of our podcast today. Homeopathy is online dating.
No, it's more than Tinder. But you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah? So, like, the question to Hahnemann is like, okay, so you went through, like, you spent a lifetime evolving into this incredible set of discoveries that are not just, like, everybody focuses on, cinchona and blah, 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 and, how, in the early parts. And I think the action is later. But you need to follow the breadcrumbs along the way. Right? So the question for Hahnemann is kind of what the hell is homeopathy and what did you learn? Like, where did you get to?
That's two questions.
It's a two-part question. Yeah. I mean, look, by the time you can ask a dead person these questions, you might as well ask two.
Okay, I've got two.
Okay. But then, like, what is the possibility so that we know how we can apply it best? Mm-hmm. And then I need, what's his name? Not Hughes, not Dudgeon. Hale. I need Hale, because Hale is the person who, well, either Hale or Sophie, Melanie's adopted daughter, married to
Carl von Benninghausen.
Yeah, Benninghausen's son. So one of the two of them, depending on who you ask, filled in the footnote to aphorism 270. I think it's 270G, which is the formulation for the, how the mathematical application to get to the 50 millesimal potency, which is basically the extraction of spirit from matter. So of course it would be, there'd be some mystery around it. So I would want to know whether or not what Hale or Sophie filled in is accurate. And yeah, those are my questions. What are yours?
Why did you leave Transylvania?
Oh, do you really care about that?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I want to know what happened to make him leave real quick.
So Hahnemann was in Transylvania and Sibiu, Romania from 1777 to 1779. He was there for, I think it was like 19 months. Mm-hmm. And so there's this controversy. So, and what he was doing there was he was curating the Baron von Bruckenthal's library. And the Baron von Bruckenthal he was an interesting character. And we went there. Well, I was there for quite some time. Al joined me at the end. Well, quite some time. I was there for like 10 days. It felt like a really long time. But the Baron von Bruckenthal, he was a Mason. He was the sort of the head of the Masonic, I don't know, whatever, brotherhood of that whole part of that eastern part of Europe. And he's the one who made Hahnemann a Mason. What was it, October 7th? I remember the date just because I learned the fact on that day, which seemed pretty interesting. And there's no evidence, there's very little evidence that Hahnemann continued on, at least overtly, in expressing any sort of affinity. He did sign some things, brother. But he was there curating the library, and he was the doctor for the Baron's family. But
including his daughters.
We saw paintings of the daughters. Al had this whole thing. We went to this museum there, and the Baron's daughters, and Al was trying to figure out which one of them Hahnemann might have been handy with, which led to his departure. Of course, you're going to make it into something pervy. But the
lost coin.
The legend goes that he stole a coin or something. Yeah. But the folks in Transylvania don't, I spent time I spent quite a lot of time talking to the sort of historians and curators there.
Isn't that interesting? You want to know the deep and heavy and sweaty philosophical stuff. I just want the salacious gossip.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I'd like to know that as well. But the thing is that the people in Transylvania don't think he stole a coin.
No.
And what they think is that he copied. So Hahnemann was cataloging the Baron's library. So what I was doing when I was there was I went through this book. It was like 6 inches tall, maybe 5 inches tall. And it was a series of folios. And those folios were, Hahnemann had a scribe or an assistant who worked with him. And it was just the two of them going through and writing down every single title of every book that was there. And so... And there's some things, I took a whole bunch of photos of the folios because there are some markings, like there's some numbers and things that I haven't been able to figure out what they represent. Anyway, but the thought is that he copied some books. So, back then, you didn't just like go to Barnes and Noble. So people would actually literally copy a book. And there are a few books that it is thought that Hahnemann copied and that Baron von Bruckenthal was not excited about. And if I had to guess, I mean, I don't want to say what the books were because I don't want to, in case it's not correct, but if I had to guess though, Hahnemann didn't know what to do with those books or had an idea about those books and copied them and carried them with him. And I think they became a later influence because he didn't apply that information until after 1816.
Because what he then did is he finished off his degree at Erlangen and then he disappeared for a year.
Yeah, there's no evidence of where he was for about a year. And Hale, who's one of Hahnemann's biographers, he says, there's no evidence of where he was, but it's suspected that he was studying metallurgy.
And geology and metallurgy.
Yeah. Which
amazing.
Makes sense.
Right.
Well, it only makes sense if you put it in the context of iatrochemistry. And, and then he winds up marrying Johanna Henrietta or Henrietta Johanna.
Both ways.
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. And sometimes I've seen it where she's referred to, which I was confused for a while because there's some texts where she's referred to both as Henrietta and Johanna.
Yeah.
Yeah, interchangeably. Anyway, but her father was a chemist, was a pharmacist. And had a lab, the 18th century equivalent of a lab, in his house. So Hahnemann. So there's some mysteries in the earlier years, but I mean that's a curious set of information to amass. Sort of the. Well, I'm sort of hesitant to say, but some of the texts that he's believed to have copied have to do, there's sort of numerology and magic. And when you say magic, I worry because people then take it into like, oh my God, Masons and magic, devil. It's not that, back at that, in those times, it was, magic was, philosophy, science was magic, philosophy, poetry, mathematics. These things were all, there's a smear across them all. So, yeah. So you want to know why he left in a hurry from Transylvania? Do you think he left on foot?
No, he caught the Cobb and Co., the Wells Fargo Express? I don't know. He would have got a horse and buggy or something.
Which is how he discovered potency. Not.
I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, how? See, there's too many gaps.
Yeah,
there's too many gaps in the history.
Yeah, like one of the things I tried to figure out was...
I mean, to a reader who's really trying to understand the secrets of what is homeopathy, it doesn't matter. Did he walk on foot or did he get the train, which didn't exist. But, to a person interested in who was he? Yeah. What influenced him? Just more granular daily questions. There's only fragments. There's really only fragments.
It's really true. Like one of the things, so like for example, trying to find information about the authors, like Hale. I've been trying to figure out about Hale. Yeah. And it's really hard to find information about him. But one of the things I'm curious about is not just how his mode of transport for leaving Transylvania, but how he got there, because he was in Vienna and he ran out of money. And he got the job in Transylvania, right? So how did he did he travel alone? Did he travel with the Baron?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
He traveled with the Baron.
Yeah. But again, I'm not going to stake anything on that. I mean,
right.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things, just since we're in Transylvania, like the first time, like they didn't let me in for a while. Remember, it took like 5 days before they let me into the library. I felt like, going to the rabbi's door and kept knocking. Please, may I come in? Give me those gloves. Let me see. So while I'm waiting, and I went, I had a bunch of meetings. I went to these lectures. They had a conference that I didn't know I had to speak at. It was quite a time. Anyway, but walking where Hahnemann walked, and they have this museum it's a museum of homeopathy and pharmacy, and they had, who's the guy? Remember the painting of the Islamic doctor? Do you remember that? Now I forget who he was. It was not Jabir.
You mean Ibn Riza? Ibn Riza is one, but from I need my lecture notes, from the 8th century, 9th century, around then, I'm going to say.
Yep. So they've got this painting of him. So there's an acknowledgement of the acquisition of information.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right?
Right.
That ultimately was integrated into Hahnemann's development of potency.
Mm. That Islamic mathematics from the...
Yeah, which my research definitely...
In Western Europe, the Dark Ages.
Yeah, so Dark Ages in Western Europe, then that information makes its way, to Western Europe and becomes Latinized, right, in the 12th or 13th century.
Yeah.
13th century, I think. And, yeah, and so, there are scholars who have published, actually, there's someone who did a PhD that, has all this logic as to how Hahnemann was not involved with alchemy, and makes a few assumptions about the lack of Islamic information available to Hahnemann. And it's like, well, A, it was Latinized, and B, there are pseudonyms. So, I think that there are some assumptions that have been made because we learn over time, right? And we apply new bits of information to ask questions. So, going back through, every time I go back through some of the biographical information about Hahnemann, it's like another clue comes because it's asking a different set of questions with, more information. What's your second question to Hahnemann? You said you had 2.
What happened in the 3 days? No, not what happened in the 3 days, but just, tell me about the 3 days. When Melanie knocked on the door.
Oh. Oh my gosh. Another salacious thing. You really...
That's the only interesting thing.
So...
last time, think about that.
You need to give more context here.
Well, Melanie turns up in Curtin, having...
Melanie, Hahnemann's second wife. So Hahnemann had been widowed for, I think, 7 years at that point. Something like that?
Yeah, 1835.
Yeah. And so he's approaching... She arrived in 1833? 35.
At 35, he's 80 years old.
He was 80. No. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. 1755. 1835. 80 years old.
So they were only together for 8 years. Uh-huh. It always seems so much... Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so Hahnemann's widowed. He's living with 2 of his daughters, and he's got he's tired. He's been busy, and
he's still working.
He's still working, and Melanie, who we talked about in a previous podcast, because
Oh, that's right.
The vindication of Melanie is so important, but she rolls up because she's got what was described as a tic de la rue in her abdomen.
Mm.
And she is said to have traveled dressed as a man. Mm-hmm. And for a variety of reasons, including safety and, finding the company of women boring and traveling with men to be more exciting and so on and so forth. And then she goes to see the good Dr. Hahnemann and
leaves 3 days later.
And missing from the case notes, missing from his case books are
missing.
her
page.
case notes are missing.
Yeah.
I say that's just a HIPAA thing.
Early
HIPAA.
That's what do you call it?
A romance out of a bodice ripper.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a person out there with a good imagination and good writing skills. Maybe you could write that one over the summer as well.
Yeah, I'll put that on my list.
3 days. The 3 days.
The 3 days.
I wonder what they talked about. Because, it's not a bodice ripper.
She had read the Organon.
Right. There's got to be something really amazing that went on between them.
Well, I'll say.
Yeah. No, because, he totally fell in love.
Yeah.
His letters to Berninghausen and to his other family members and other homeopaths are just, they're amazing.
Yeah. And there's so many ways to weave it into an alchemical tale.
Oh.
Which we don't have time to do today.
No, we're not going to do that. But we do have lots to do this summer. We have 13 weeks before school starts.
I can't believe it. And the first thing that happens, I'm super excited because we have our team retreat. Every summer we do a team retreat and people start arriving next Tuesday. Carly arrives and then Andrea and then the whole gang. So at AHE we this kind of started by happenstance. Before COVID, it might have been 2019 that we started doing this, but the conference, JHC conference, and the AHE graduation were scheduled just a week apart. So everyone came to graduation and then stayed on until the conference, and we all traveled to the conference together. And it turned out to be this incredible work week. And so we've done a work retreat every year, even during COVID. People traveled, and we block out a week, and it's all meetings and fun. And this year, there are quite a few people coming. Our house will be full. We've rented a few Airbnbs. There'll be a lot of food and cooking, a lot of meetings that take place in the kitchen, outside. Last year, we were sitting around the pool.
That was amazing.
Yeah, our pool it's a kiddie pool.
A kiddie pool.
But we had a big meeting. All of us were in the pool or around the pool. There were computers and notes. It's really the best. Path making, right. Parker and Alastair were laying bricks during the meeting. So the paths were being, it's just the best week. And
it really is. But it's also a review, we tried this, let's review it, what happened,
Yeah, we take notes all year long. So when students give us feedback, we take it into account. So we kind of take notes of everything, all the classes. If a class, if we need more time, less time, do we need to add a new topic or things out of order? Then we go and we literally take the thing apart, dust it off, and put it back together again, which is so important.
That's next week.
I can't wait.
All right.
And of course, we'll make the dates. The AHE signature dish.
Wow.
Yeah, the dates.
I reckon you should keep that secret.
They're delicious.
All right.
This didn't turn out as we'd planned.
It never turns out the way we planned.
No. Why plan? Thanks for listening. Thanks for caring about homeopathy. See you again.
AHE is changing the face of homeopathy education by raising the bar through rigorous academics and unparalleled clinical training delivered live through the soulful use of cutting-edge technology. AHE prepares its students to become fully rounded homeopathic practitioners from anywhere in the world. Apply today at ahe.online.